this is Teronsuke from CGbytes.com. I'm here with Les of Sixus1. Now, first of all, this is a huge pleasure for me personally. I and many others have followed your products for years, and it's pretty safe to say that when you think of the world of 3D products and figures, you also think of Sixus. So my first question has to be, did you ever see any of this coming when you first started out years ago?
Considering when I started out with 3D, no, not at all. And that's because, in the long ago, of the early 90s, I actually started with like 3D Studio DOS and have been doing 3D since, let's see, I graduated high school in 93. So yeah, it was late 93, early 94 that I actually started teaching myself 3D via 3D Studio DOS. And wow. Yeah. So no, I never saw any of this coming, and like Poser 1 hit and it was a hobby. I picked it up. I was like, oh, this is kind of neat. This is pretty cool. I can use this, and I can use this on Windows 95 instead of DOS. Haha, that's great. And so it just was a thing. It was just kind of a fun thing to do while I was drawing comic books and doing airbrushing for a living. So, that was it. And yeah, did I ever see this coming? Not then. Not when I started. After a couple years, maybe, but not then.
Now, speaking of starting out, how exactly did you get into creating 3D products?
Well, I had my career as an artist started when I was about 19. Oh yeah, I was 19, and I had moved from Southeast Kentucky to just outside of New York to pursue comic books. Well, yeah, pursue a career drawing comic books, which I still do, and so there, go buy my comic books. But
insert shameless plug here. No.
But in the course of doing comics, of course, at 19 years old, you're not going to make a lot of money. In comics, you may never make a lot of money anyway. So you're always looking for ways to supplement your income and do things as an artist to make money. And I ended up, this was 1993. Photoshop barely existed, let alone anything really digital going on much. Digital coloring in comics just started. So at that time, traditional art skills that I had could roll into advertising really easily, especially with airbrushing and stuff like that. So I ended up kind of parsing out my time between comics and commercial art, and just started a career with that. But through the commercial art, with the commercial art folks, they would inevitably see comics, and in their eyes, they were like, "Oh, comics! Oh, those are storyboards." And they would see them as storyboards for animation and for advertising, things like that. So it kind of, it rolled into doing storyboards for ad agencies, which and all of this happened inside a span of like a year and a half, 2 years. It all happened super fast. So it went from, comics to storyboarding and ad agency work and stuff like that to really developing this interest. And of course, you go to meetings and you see the guys then who had what computers they had then. And I was like, oh, that's really neat. That's really interesting, And I just took an interest. So I was like, okay, build a machine, look into the software, do what I can, get, buy into the stuff and start teaching myself. And so that's literally how the entire Sixus1 thing started. Was actually Sixus1 was the handle that I used on bulletin boards back in the pre-Windows 95 days. So, that's kind of where it all comes from. And it's been a really strange, I've been very fortunate through the years that because of when I started, and I think because at that age, you're still young enough that your brain's real malleable and you learn stuff differently and quickly.
Right.
Those two things together for me allowed me to come into 3D as an art form at a time when it was really in its infancy still. And so just as technology has grown, I've just been right there keeping pace the entire time. So I've told people many times, especially my son, who's been studying under me for about 5 years now. I've told him, I'm like, man, I don't envy you starting this now, because there's so much to learn. There's so much catching up to do. I mean, for me, there's no catching up to do because I've been there the whole way. But man, it's the idea of being a young person trying to do that. It's definitely formidable.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, yeah, that's pretty much where it comes from.
Now, throughout your career, you've primarily been a Poser creator. Now, besides the obvious reason of why Poser, there was no Daz back then. What's been the thing that's kept you with Poser all these years?
Well, as far as maybe, well, up until Daz Studio, it was just that there was nothing else. And even then, my my thing with Poser really started out as a hobby because a long time ago, back then when it first came out, there was really just a handful of folks who were kind of picking the software apart, figuring out how to make it do things it wasn't really supposed to do, and then sharing the results of that through the avenues that were available at the time. And there's a handful of us from that era still active. I think most of us have went on to one or another company position somewhere or whatever. But anyway, we know who we are, and the thing is, back then it was fun. I did it for fun. I saw Poser, and I still see Poser as this in a way, as a really great kind of unsung avenue for fast animation, for doing fast little animation projects, doing things like animatics and stuff like that. And so, I was always working on trying to develop different ways to use it for that stuff. And so, thing is, really, as Poser started, like by '96, by 1996, I had really left comics almost completely for a lot of reasons. The comic book industry is crazy kinds of volatile, always has been. And with the ad agency type work and all that kind of stuff, I had moved on. And I ended up becoming an art director for a media company. And that was a cool gig, and it paid well, and all that sort of stuff. So I started focusing on that kind of a career, and just sort of drifted away, really. And I mean, I had been, God, I was a moderator at the site that would eventually become one of the other really big sites that's out there. I won't. Yeah, I won't. I won't promote somebody else on on something like this, but suffice it to say, there's a really big site whose name rhymes with Schminder. That
oh yes, that one, yes.
Schmindo, yes.
Schmindo, yes.
Schmindo. Rear endo. Yes.
You could always just say it, and I can add in like a beep censor sound. It'd be really cool.
There you go. Well, you can censor me. You can censor me later for obvious reasons. But
no.
But yeah, there used to be a thing called Poser Forum Online a long time ago, and I was one of the moderators of some of the forums on that, and helped out with a bunch of stuff with it, and was friends with the folks who owned it. And it was cool. It was a great relationship, a great time. It was very community oriented, lots of cool artwork going on, just cool stuff. It was just a cool thing, and it was a cool part of what for me was kind of a hobby side of things I also did professionally. And as the professional part of my life became more hectic and more demanding, the hobby side of it had to sort of kind of get put away. And so I kind of walked away from that stuff. And then a couple years later, I just on a whim kind of, I'd poke in from time to time, see things going on. And then I was like, oh, okay, the site's now this other site. It's changed its name. Somebody else owns it. Cool. And I mean, I saw that almost as soon as it happened. Like on that site has like ridiculously large numbers of people signed up to it, and my member number is like 77. So it's
nice.
really it's really funny to me when It's like I hear people talk about being around this stuff for a long time, and I'm like, oh, I got into this in 2005. I'm like, you child, you child. That's adorable.
I feel old. I've been here since Poser 3, and I'm still a youngin' compared to other people out there, so I
Yeah, I've
understand.
been here since Poser 1,
Yeah.
the first damn one. But yeah, when that changed, that site changed, I was like, oh well, this is kind of neat. So I started poking around again and just kind of flirting around with things. And maybe another year after that, there was kind of this whole idea of selling stuff that we used to give away for free. Which, and make no mistake, I'm a capitalist. I like to make money. So I was like, oh yeah, that's cool, man. People will buy this. I never thought about monetizing this. This is neat. And so fast forward another year or two of just kind of watching on the sidelines and seeing all kinds of things happen. And uh, my uh, art director position eventually got liquidated with a big .com bust. And there's a number of other things that kind of hit, like happens in life. There's all kinds of details to that I won't get into because it takes forever. But suffice it to say, I ended up out of work and newly married, out of work, with a 3-year-old son and a newborn daughter. And my response is crap because I gotta come up with something to provide for everybody. And
Right.
so I had amassed a little bit of film gear, um, because film and special effects is one of my passions and stuff like that. So Rebecca and I talked it out, and I sold off my film gear for enough money for us to live on for a couple of months. Um, and over the course of the first year or so of doing this stuff, I did also moonlight at some other art related jobs like with print companies and things like that because I've just been around art. So I mean, it's all I've done for a living my whole adult life is some kind of art. So it's just where I go. Um, but I sold the stuff and it was enough to live on for a couple of months while I started building our very first original figure that was the Sixus1 werewolf. This thing's ancient now, but to my knowledge, I don't want to say it was the first. I never want to make a claim like that because I really don't know if I can actually substantiate it or not. But I would say that it was definitely one of the very first original figures released for Poser. Um, that didn't come out of the Daz catalog of stuff from the Zygote days and so on and so forth. So it was we were I think we kind of were a pioneer of the whole uh, I guess indie, if you want to call it, independent vendor concept for doing that sort of stuff. We weren't making add-ons for anybody else. These we were standalone figures. Who the hell
Right
does
on.
that? So and honestly, it was kind of a crazy move, and it's something that a lot of people were like, dude, this is nuts. This can't work. But then the numbers started rolling, and it's like, oh, I beg to differ.
This
I
definitely
I
works.
think we've struck something here. So
Black
you know,
gold, Texas tea.
yeah, and the funny thing though is like there are lots of things we could have done along the way that would have made us a lot more money than it did. I mean, we're not rich by any means, any stretch. And a lot of people kind of I don't know if it's the way we present ourselves or I don't know. I don't fully grasp what it is. Other than I kind of have this attitude that um, kind of I kind of look to guy like Gene Simmons is one of my heroes. It's like the what he said about Kiss when they started was that they wanted to look like they had $1 million even if they were eating out of a garbage can.
Right.
And I've always kind of had that attitude about us. So I think a lot of people maybe don't realize how tiny we actually are. We're a small operation. We usually fly under the radar of most evil empires.
Right.
So
Now, speaking of that, for the people who don't know, what exactly makes up Sixes? How many of you are there? Because I've talked to people over the years who thought, you were a huge group of people,
you
lots and lots of people, and other people go, no, no, it's just, blah blah blah. So,
um,
for those people who don't know, how many of you are there?
right now, technically three,
Hmm?
um, and that would be myself, my wife, and our son Killian.
Hmm? Now, has it always been that way, or did you used to have, or did you have like people that you'd bring in, or people that would collab with you under your
Well,
banner name?
probably 99% of everything we've ever released was made by me. Um, there was a here's the funny thing about it is there have been times where we've expanded beyond just me and Rebecca, but usually it was because we had a client project and we would find artists we knew, usually out of the Poser community. Um, we would kind of keep a little running list of folks we knew we could count on when client work came in that maybe was a little too much, and then we'd bring them in per project and expand and contract our size of our studio like that. And we still do that. That's something that we still do. And I love keeping in touch with and building relationships with other artists in this, because there are times when we may ramp up. I mean, in 2003 to 2004, we worked on a video game project. I won't say what it was, but we worked on a video game project where I personally ended up doing 135 characters in under a year.
Wow.
Model, texture, and rig.
Nice. Wow.
And see them into the engine. So, I mean, it's kind of obscene, the amount of work that I've personally had to do through the years and that we as a studio have done. When it comes to the actual Poser market, though, oddly enough, we don't really. We've had a couple. There've been maybe 3 or 4 people we've done a product or two with in the past where it was really they would do a product and we would do something that kind of played well with it, like something that was like we would do a creature, they'd do an environment that went with it. Right. We would do a monster, we'd do a robot, and they would do a vehicle that went with it, stuff like that. So
with that, I hearken back to your Cirque du Macabre days, and with Luke A putting out some add-ons that went along with the Cirque du Macabre world.
Exactly. So it was like that kind of thing has happened a number of times, both completely by chance and sometimes engineered. I really like it when that can happen, when we can coordinate those things, because, man, when people are reliable and willing to work with us, and everybody can share a vision like that, and we can work together to create a real continuity of product, man.
Yeah, everyone benefits.
Everybody can benefit so much. It's so great. But it is a nightmare trying to rank people, into doing that and getting them to be reliable. Well, and because I get it. Part of the nature of it is you really don't get paid for that stuff until it sees market. So it's all upfront time investment.
Yeah.
And most people, even I have trouble sometimes. There's lots of things I'd like to do that I don't get to do because I have to justify the upfront time investment. So I totally get that. But the times where we have gotten to do it, like the Cirque du Macabre, there was, even going back way before that, there was a short period where we were doing some kind of sci-fi, space marine-y type stuff. Okay. That there was a gentleman who worked with us. Unfortunately, there were some misunderstandings on the way. I think he got pissed. The dude got pissed off at me, and I still don't understand why, but whatever. Anyway, there's some stuff like that along the way. And there's always crap like that happens, and it really, that part sucks. Shit like that. Pardon me. Things like that suck. But I really enjoy that. I love it when we can get to work with people, but the vast majority of the time we don't. I mean, in the time that I've been, I say in my career, I don't know if it's necessarily my career or not, but in my time with Poser, I've built somewhere. I stopped counting in 2008. I used to kind of keep a running tally of how many things I'd done, and always been real anal about tracking my own progress as an artist. And I stopped keeping count in 2008 when the number of figures that I had made.
Hold on. Don't. Never mind. I was going to say, don't say it yet. We'd pause for a moment. Maybe because I was talking over you, they didn't hear it. And even if they can hear it, I'm going to edit it out. So, before you give the number, I want everybody out there right now who's watching this on YouTube, listening to the podcast, or if you're reading it, it'll be harder. But stop and come up with your own number. We'll wait for a second. You got your number in your head?
It's
all right, Les.
What
you stop counting at what number?
I stopped counting how many figures I had made when it passed 2,000.
And that was back in
2008.
yeah. Which is
So
why I said at the beginning of this, it's pretty safe to say when you think of 3D products and figures, the name Sixus1 comes to your head. And
I
that's one of the reasons why. Between your vast library of figures and plugins and environments and the worlds that you've created. Yeah. I honestly didn't think it was that high myself, but once I
well
started
now
thinking about it
that's
last
also
night,
including
it
that's including things that I've done for clients that
right.
that if it released to the public didn't necessarily get my name on it. And a lot of it, people here, it's a funny thing. People don't realize how often small, let's see, ad agencies, film studios, animation studios, or game studios, people don't realize how often and for how long they've actually used Poser. I mean, part of the gig on the big game gig that I did all those years ago, it was for an MMO RPG, and in order to facilitate a pipeline that would allow a lot of things to be interchangeable across these characters, I actually used Poser. I brought in a programmer and had them write a BVH translator plugin that would work better in Poser than what he had, and then we created a pipeline where I could use the BVH BioVision hierarchy animation data format to go back and forth from Poser into this particular game engine. And so we created a pipeline. Then I mean now we've got Poser Game Dev. Thank you. It's about time.
right.
Because it's like, oh look, Poser Game Dev. Yeah, I did that in 2003. Come on, guys, catch up. Just catch up here. But but uh, so I mean, yeah, it's yeah, dude, the sheer amount of stuff through the years. I mean, just in 2020, I guess it was 11 or 12. I don't know. The last 6 years have been a blur. We did my son and I together. Killian, man, the kid, he amazes me. He's so much. He I don't want to say he's better than me yet because he's only 19,
right.
but but he is at 19 where like I can't even pick a point in my career where I was at skill wise with compared to him. I mean, he's 19 years old, and I will literally, as far as modeling and texturing goes, I'll put him up against anybody I know in or out of Poser and anywhere in the 3D industries.
And that's not
Anybody.
just because your bias is helping his dad.
No, actually, we homeschooled our kids, but then let them when they decided when they were old enough that we thought they could make the decision. Both of them tried public school. One of my kids stayed in public school, and my son decided he didn't like it, and he specifically said, "Dad, I want to come study under you." When he was 14, he said, "I want to apprentice under you. I want to do what you do."
right on.
And I told him, I was like, do you realize what you're asking? Do you realize the amount of discipline and hard work? And do you realize I'm going to give you hell? I'm not, it's like, I don't want to say I'm demanding to work with or work for. I mean, I think I set very reasonable expectations and all that, but I'm also very no BS when it comes to getting things done, getting projects done, getting stuff done. I mean, that's a trait I think that's a character trait of mine that a lot of my fellow artists maybe don't quite share sometimes. Because I see a lot of artists who start things and then don't finish them, and I'm very keen on, by God, if I start it, it's going to get done,
Right.
whether it's a product or a line or a project or whatever. And so, when my son, he wanted to do this, it was like, okay, kid, you've grown up with me. You know who you're talking to. You know what a disciplinarian and what a hard ass I am. He's like, yeah, I'm willing to try. Okay. And 5 years later, and trust me, I mean, it was like, okay, if you're going to do this, you're going to be here at 9 o'clock in the morning. You're going to work until at least 5 o'clock with me every day. You're going to do exactly what I tell you. You're going to do it how I tell you. I'm going to explain things along the way, but it's going to be hard, and on top of that, he always knew that, it's I don't cut him he doesn't get a break cut for being my son. If anything, he gets
worse.
Gets far, far worse.
Right.
And in part because he's grown up around this. I mean, when, oh man, like when he was 9, I forgot what movie it was, or some movie we went and watched, and the whole time he's leaning over me going, Dad, look at the compositing on this. This is crap. Oh my God, the anisotropic shaders on that ship, man, good Lord, why did they render that like that? That doesn't fit. Look at the lights. And he's like, just, he's a kid. He's a little kid. He's like 8, 9 years old, and just ripping this stuff apart. And every last ounce of it, totally insightful and dead on. And I'm like, man, this is cool. I mean, it's great because, I mean, he is a kid. He was 19. He's an adult now, but, he's worked with me all this time as a kid. And so he still has a lot of the kid tendencies. He loves his video games, loves to play games and all that stuff. But I noticed, like, when he'd be playing games with his friends, he would look at his friends. He'd be like Call of Duty. He'd be like, "Can you believe the texture fidelity is so bad in this game?" And they're like, "What?" And he's like, "No, look at this, look at this." And he'd like start pointing stuff out to him, and they're like, "What are you talking about?" And you just be like, "God, you people don't get it here." It's great actually. But yeah, he's 19. Like now, I really don't have to show him a whole lot. There's a point at this stuff where you really learn a set of skills, and then it really becomes up to you to kind of expand those. Now, most of the time, I give him assignments. I'll draw up concept art for him and hand that stuff to him, or he'll do concept sculpts in Zbrush and then work that stuff, for himself. But most of the time now, we Rebecca and I will give him assignments. We bring him in on client work, all kinds of stuff like that. And the bulk of his instruction these days is just when he runs into something that he doesn't know how to rig. Rigging's the big thing. When he runs into things that he might not quite know how to rig right off, or sometimes there's technical stuff with getting things into game engines, or just it's mostly little nuanced things that come from experience, but outside of that, I mean, he's kind of insane. And so yeah, anyway, all that to say, I got off on the tangent of talking about him because he's included in things. It was like 2010, 2011 maybe, that we worked on some folks, in Poser may recognize the name. We worked with Brian Haberlin, or Haberlin. I never pronounce his name right. On a book that he was doing. Brian's, in the comic industry, which is cool for me. But on this book that he worked on called Anomaly, it was a 370-page graphic novel, and we modeled, textured, rigged, and animated that summer. I think it was upwards of 40 characters for the augmented reality app that accompanies the book.
Nice.
And probably a good half of the modeling and texturing on that was Killian, which he was 16 at the time. So
there's a hell of a work summer for you.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. And then we also worked on 2 other books with Brian's company like that. So that was kind of cool. It was a great experience for him. Then there was a tabletop miniatures game that we took the contract to it. And I actually just, since it didn't have to be rigged, I was like, "Here, son, sculpt these." And and it had, I think it was like 40 or 50 some pieces in it. And I did 2 of them. There were 2 really big ones. I was like, "Okay, these are cool ideas. Dad gets these."
Right.
It was like a giant rhino with a giant, like a kaiju sized rhino who is piloted by these little mice riding on his shoulders, and it's adorable. So I was like, "That one's mine. That one's mine, son. You get the rest." So, but he knocked those out, and it was great. It was really cool stuff. There's actually on Sixus1.com, we've got a showcase section up on the site where you could see turntables of some of the sculpts from that, and so. Cool.
Now
and actually, in that realm, in that sort of sphere of 3D too, we also just started working with a company called Collapse Industries, where we're doing. I've got a line of resin kits that I'm doing with them, six sculpts that they'll be producing as really kind of 1/6 scale, high quality resin kits. And that stuff, I know they're looking to have that out sometime, maybe this summer in the like, I guess, collectible circuit. I'm not entirely sure. They're starting to get into areas of business areas there that I'm not real up on. But anyway, yeah, so we're all over the place, man.
Right. Now you had mentioned lines, and you just mentioned about sculpting out a rhino, right? So that brings me to my next question. Tell us about the Impossible Animals series and how that came to be.
Oh, the impossible animals. Well, really, those things are kind of born from goofy crap Rebecca would send me from on the internet. I mean, that's really what it is. People,
Nice.
she
Like
would
the
see
spider
things.
squirrel.
Yeah, she would see things where people would Photoshop, you know, different little animals in different ways and so on and so forth, and be like, "Oh my God, that's so cute, that's so neat," blah 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 blah, all that sort of stuff. And because she's a chick and she digs cute stuff, and so anyway, yeah, I really the brainchild for all that stuff was hers. And that's where some of our ideas come from too. I mean, I've done so many things now that a lot of times I'm like, "Hey, honey, I need to make some. Throw something at me." She'd be like, "Oh, okay. Why don't you put these things together?" Okay, cool. And I'll make it. Um, but that's kind of what happened with those. It really started with the meow. That was the one that she wanted, and I really didn't want to do it because, as anybody who does this stuff knows, feathers, screw that.
Right.
Um, she was like, "Well, what about this? What if you put together a chipmunk and a spider? We'll call it a chiter." I'm like, "My God, woman, could you get any cuter?" And so there was that. And then she was like, "Now let's do a bat and a pig, and we'll call him Boink." Like, you are just too cute. And she's like, "Now make my freaking meow." Like, damn it. All right.
Right.
So we made the meow.
So in the end, approximately how many are in that series, if you can remember?
Um, there's only the 3 for right now. It's one of those things that I actually want to go back to it as soon as I possibly can. But I just, there aren't enough hours in the day for the number of things that I either want to make or become contractually obligated to make for one client or another.
And cloning still hasn't been perfected yet.
Yeah, the closest I've got is, I've worked with a lot of different artists through the years, but really to have one I could work with the best, I had to kind of, breed him.
Yeah, you had to make one yourself.
Yeah, I had to make it myself. So
in the boudoir science lab.
yeah. If I wish I could fabricate maybe about 4 more of them who weren't quite as pithy as he is sometimes.
But then the gestation period to get there is just too long.
Yeah, and Rebecca, her baby making machine days are over. So she's like, nope. She's like, "I'm 5 foot tall and you're 6'2". You make big babies when you're done. It's like those little Russian dolls when one of my babies comes out.
The nesting dolls.
Yeah, my daughter was literally 2 feet tall at birth.
Oh my
like
goodness.
10.5 pounds.
Nice.
Now think about that. She's 2 feet tall. Mother's 5 feet tall. So, I mean, she's a third her height at birth.
Right now, the entire audience just went, "Whoa!"
Oh yeah, I mean, it was like some Lovecraftian other dimensional crap when that child was born, and I'm there going, "Oh my God, there's my daughter."
Is that how the myth
of my daughter?
Is that how the Mythos series was born?
It's like, does this baby ever stop?
Wow.
Crap! I'm like hand over handing this child trying to pull it out. Eventually it's like, and there it comes. Yeah. Rebecca is going to kill me for every last ounce of that, but it'll be worth it.
And I'm not editing it out at all.
She's gonna be like, no more live interviews for you.
Yeah, right.
Audio, all text. I will edit them.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for tuning in to our first and last live interview.
If I survive it, even.
Right.
She's still gonna kill me for that.
I'm going to go ahead and break right now. Tune in to the rest of the interview in the next video, part 2. There should be a link below. Go ahead and click that, or just go to the YouTube page and click on part 2 of the Sixus1 Spotlight interview. And we'll be right back at part 2.